Welcome and happy International Women's Day again. So we are doing a panel discussion today. We have a series of questions prepared in just facilitating this conversation. I do want you all to feel like you can leverage the chat if we have time at the end. Feel free to drop in your thoughts there or additional questions. But as we get started, I would love everyone to go around and introduce themselves. Maybe Nicole, we can start with you.
Thanks, Kate. I'm Nicole Wood. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders here at Ama La Vida. I'm based here in Chicago in our home office that we lovingly call the Happiness Hub. I am a mother of a 2-year-old daughter named Isabel. I have 2 dogs and more plant babies than I can count. And are we doing fun facts? Do we want a fun fact?
I love it.
One
Yeah.
out. This one's random and I haven't told anybody this in a long time, but I learned how to ride a unicycle before I could ride a bike and probably could still only ride the unicycle and not very successfully ride a bike.
I love it. I love it.
But I haven't tried in a while. So maybe that'll be a short form in the chat. What? You didn't know that form? Well, there you go. There's my fun fact.
I love it. Peggy, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Peggy Wu. I am a life and career coach at Ama La Vida. So outside of Ama La Vida, I'm also a yoga instructor and a finance and accounting consultant for small businesses. Fun fact, I want to thank Nicole for reminding me of this. I'm actually I guess I can say a voiceover actress. I take on 1 or 2 jobs per year, and it's really fun. I usually take on jobs in Mandarin, so I'm able to speak that language. And usually these are commercial spots for TV or radio. And it's so good to be here. And it's my honor to celebrate International Women's Day with everyone here today. And thank you so much for being here. Back to you, Kate.
Leslie, would you like to introduce yourself?
I will. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Leslie Pogue. I am an author and speaker, and with Ama La Vida, I'm a life and health and wellness coach. A few areas of my focus really is self-actualization, limiting beliefs, public speaking, which is also one of my favorites. Doesn't come up too much, so if anyone is looking for that, I'm your girl. And fun fact for me is I actually do stand-up comedy.
Love it. I'm realizing with these introductions, I did not introduce myself. I'm Kate Swami, and I am a life leadership and career coach here at Ama La Vida. I am based in Seattle, and I am a mother of a 3-year-old son named Lennon. I also have a doggy baby named Marley, and like Nicole, I have lots of plant babies too. Fun fact about me. Oh my goodness. I am like creepy with birthdays and remembering dates. I don't know what it is. I will remember people's birthdays. And from there, if we've ever discussed horoscopes or like your sun sign or rising or moon, I just really have this memory around that. And I'm super curious about astrology. And that's actually an area that I continue to become more passionate and learn more about. And there's lots of interesting things happening right now if you want to go down that rabbit hole. But that's a little bit about me. We're here, obviously, for International Women's Day. And I think something that I know for sure comes up with a lot of my clients who primarily are women. I do have male clients as well. But is this topic of imposter syndrome, right? And really not feeling enough and kind of doubting or questioning yourself or feeling like you're a fraud where you're at. And I do see it a lot with women. And I think I'd love to really start the conversation from that place. And maybe we can go around in the same order. Nicole, Peggy, and Leslie, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? And if so, when? And if you were somehow immune to it, please tell us your secrets. But I think just in general, what advice you would give women as they navigate this tricky topic and something that honestly follows us throughout our lives. So would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've experienced imposter syndrome, I think, as long as I can remember. I was a competitive dancer growing up, and I remember going into competitions just assuming folks were better than me. And that's kind of the same flavor of imposter syndrome I would say that I have. I've got a healthy dose of a lot of the different types, but mine is less about feeling fraudulent, and I think more about devaluing my skill set, especially in comparison to others, assuming that they have something I don't, or they know more than I do. I think a lot about the Michelle Obama quote, where she talks about how she sat at like every powerful table in the world and pretty quickly realized that these people are not all that smart, and definitely not smarter than she is. And so I think it's a helpful reframe when I'm intimidated about a meeting or feeling less than, to remember, like, I have no basis to put these people on any form of pedestal higher than I am. So thank you, Michelle, for that one. And I think another thing that I always come back to is re-anchoring around strengths. And so when I'm feeling really lost or less than, it's usually because I'm comparing myself to someone else who I'm not, or I'm expecting myself to have a skill set that they have. And I can't. I'm Nicole, and I can only be Nicole. And so I often revisit the strengths exercises I've done with my coach and do something that I know I'm uniquely gifted at, or think about ways that only I can contribute, and really focus on that. And it brings me self-esteem just in the act of doing it. But then, of course, again, I'm thriving because I'm contributing meaningfully in a way that's specific to me.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I love that, coming back to your strengths and actually what's right with you, and really maximizing your potential from there. So thank you so much for sharing. Peggy, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I experience imposter syndrome more often than I would like to admit, especially when I'm doing something I'm not familiar with. So how do I navigate? I really just navigate by doing it anyway, even though it's scary. Lean into the discomfort, because I tell myself that if I can do this, I'm going to grow, I'm going to become better, and I will feel really good about myself. So I do it anyway, and I trust that I can figure things out. But remember, this doesn't just come to me naturally. This is after years of learning about myself. And also, I want to say a shout out to my clients, my coaching clients. They inspire me. A lot of times when I talk to them, I learn about their imposter syndrome, and I try to help them overcome that. And I'm at the same time, I'm helping myself too. So my advice is focus on the reality. Nobody's perfect. Nobody knows everything. And it's important that we rethink and re-examine our beliefs. A lot of times we have imposter syndrome because we are afraid of failure. We're afraid of doing something wrong and people are going to judge us. But the reality is people are probably not thinking about us as much as we think they are. And if there is that fear for failure, then redefine what failure is. Don't go with someone else's definition, go with your own. So these are the little things I will do: lean into discomfort, redefine failure, and also trust that you can figure it out, and ask for help. If you ever feel that you can't do this on your own, that's okay. Just ask for help. People are willing to help you. You just have to find the right people and ask. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so many things you said, Peggy, were so good. But I love this one about, like, I mean, I say this to my clients, like, people are not staying up all night worrying about you and your career, worrying about you and the way that you're thinking about how you've been perceived, right? And I think that it's like funny and it's a hard truth, but I think even that can be grounding of like, okay, I'm my biggest critic here. Yes, the self-doubt will walk with me and the imposter syndrome will be there, but it doesn't have to be the main character on the stage, right? So I love that. Leslie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, same with me. I guess I mirror a lot of what Nicole and Peggy said. Like Nicole, actually, as a younger person, I actually too was a dancer, but I was really big into entertainment. And back then, I didn't have imposter syndrome. I thought I was the best thing ever. I had no problem. It wasn't until I became an adult and got into the world and really was responsible for myself that that started to creep in, started getting jobs, started, hearing other people tell me that I wasn't good enough or I was too mean or whatever it is. And so that kind of started to live there. And as I've gotten older, like you said, with maturity, you also start to come more comfortable in your own skin. And so I've gotten a lot more comfortable in my own skin. I'm starting to mirror that younger person more so now than before, but it's still a challenge because that we are growing. We're often growing, at least I am. I like growing and learning new things. And so like Nicole, I mean, I look at myself, I look at my accomplishments, I remind myself of my strengths and the things that I do. I also remind myself of the value that I bring. So even though it's different than this person that I still might be comparing myself to, it's like, yeah, but what is different that I bring to the table? And then I'm also a little quirky. So I often have a theme song. And it changes depending upon what's going on in my world. And so I'll usually do that to pump myself up, and I'll just kind of have that inner conversation with myself. And then I'll put on my theme song and just kind of rock it out or do whatever to pump myself up. And then that brings back that self-esteem, that self-worth, that reminding that, hey, this is what you look like in the world, and be okay with that. And I can usually move forward from there.
I love it. Do you mind sharing your theme song right now?
Of course, I love sharing my theme song. Right now, my theme song is Standards by Leslie Odom Jr.
I'll have to check that out.
It's awesome. It's a little saucy, but I love it. It really just gets me moving.
Okay, I'm making note. Thank you. And I love, I think just kind of pulling on the strengths piece too, I'm wondering if after this we could send out, we have a strengths module that is open to you all and what I mean by module, it's kind of a self-reflection exercise tool that you can go through and really tap into those strengths. So that might be a helpful resource that we can share in following up today. So as women, there's lots of barriers that we face, and it may not necessarily be because we're women. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But especially around the confidence and the imposter syndrome conversation, we're talking about. Well, Peggy was mentioning, doing hard things and like moving past them or like overcoming obstacles. And I wonder if everyone could go around and share what has been a significant barrier that you faced in your career and how have you overcome it? Nicole, do you want to start?
No, someone else can kick it off.
Here, I'll start.
Okay.
Okay. There are many barriers, but I want to talk about real and self-imposed. So I came from banking, and in the corporate days, I wanted to advance. So I asked for a job that would require a lot of technical knowledge that I didn't have at the time. I felt very fortunate that my former boss gave me a chance and allowed me to learn. So I had to work really hard to catch up. But the lack of experience was a true barrier. And it was really hard, difficult, challenging, all the words you can think of. But at the same time, I knew if I just buckle down and just keep doing it, I'll learn and I'll become really good at it. But then let's talk about self-imposed barriers. Well, banking is a very traditional industry. A lot of people work there. Leslie, you can attest to that. A lot of people work there for 20, 30 years. So they're very seasoned. I used to have to sit in the boardroom at the time, being probably the only one Asian females at that position. We had to review our loans. We have these quarterly portfolio review, I had to sit in a boardroom with 10 other older men. I felt very intimidated. And those meetings are very serious and people are not very friendly, rightfully so, because it was all about business. And I feel, again, right, this is self-imposed. I feel I look younger than my actual age. And also being Asian, also I'm a first-generation immigrant. English is not my native language. So there are a lot of things that are going through my mind as I sit there and talk about my portfolio, that fear. What if I said something that's incorrect? What if I look very inexperienced? What if people are judging me because I'm still new? There are just so many things. And of course, I was just really freaking myself out. Usually things are fine. No one's gonna pick on me. And this has to do with the relationship I have with myself. I was doubting myself, it's not like someone else said something and did something that proved that I wasn't good enough. So anyway, long story short, a lot of times, yes, there are true barriers, but at the same time, I ask myself, are those facts? Are the things going through my mind truly what happened? Or are these just my assumptions? So to overcome that, it takes, Leslie said that earlier, it takes a lot of time and maturity, right? And experiences to know that, to find yourself and know that actually I'm okay. It's okay to trust that I am enough and I deserve to be here. I think this gets into a little bit of sense of belonging as well, which, there's a lot to talk about there too. And I want to say that if I were to do this again, I want to shift my mindset and really just focus on what is real, what's reality, what's within my control, instead of thinking about assumptions and how people might feel about me. And also give myself some grace. It's okay if I make a mistake because I'm only human. And no matter how experienced other people are, I'll get there one day. Maybe today I'm not there yet, but that's okay. I'll be there eventually. Okay,
That's
I
so
think.
beautiful. Yeah. I think a powerful coaching tool that you unlocked for all of us there is this idea of there are facts and actual data of what happened, and then we can associate a story, or we build a story around what is going on, right? And then that is what the trigger then is for the feelings of imposter syndrome and doubt and all of that, right? And so I think it's a very grounding exercise that you've given to us, like what do I actually know to be true here, right? So I love that. Thank you so much. And I just saw the word grace pop up, and I love that as well. Who would like to go next?
I can go next. Well, for me, I have to say, actually, I'm sad to say, really, that my most significant barrier has been female bosses. Unfortunately, I was always a excited, just gung-ho person. And anytime I came into, especially as a younger person, I couldn't wait to make everything more efficient and learn as much as I could and ask all kinds of questions and just find out everything there was to know about whatever it was I did, even whether it was purposeful jobs or not, if it was just a job to have a job, or if it was something I really wanted to do. I was always that person who was like, so tell me more. So how do we do this? And who do I talk to about this? And what do I want to do? But whenever I had a female boss, a lot of times that was looked at as, I don't want to make assumptions, but there was a lot of of stalling. I remember one boss I was so excited. I was working reception, but I also came in as a temp as an executive assistant. And I had all these ideas because I was seeing how they were running things and how things were organized. I had all these ideas and I was like, oh, we can do this and we can do that and we can do this and we can do that. And she looked at me and she said, you get one more. And I'm thinking I get one more idea. And she said, one more complaint. So she saw my ambition and my excitement as me complaining, when actually I was like, there's so many ways we can be so much more efficient. And that's what I found. I found that going to some of my female bosses to mentor me, to teach me more about just not only the industry I was in, but just working in the world. Like, how do I look like you? Because I would see so many elegant and they were just so confident in their career. And it's like, how do I get there? And there was very little help there. And I've also been blocked from opportunities for growth. I remember trying to move into the training space in one of the banking areas I was an executive assistant to the regional director. And I learned later, because I didn't get it when I auditioned, I always say auditioned, when I applied for the job. And I learned later because I was friends with the people that were doing the interviewing, and they came to me and they told me that my boss is the one that said, hey, I don't want to lose her. And because that person was a person of influence in the organization, they didn't hire me. So it wasn't, they were very clear in letting me know that it wasn't that I wasn't qualified to do it. They really loved the ideas I brought to that interview. But because the person, my boss, a female boss, said, no, I don't want to lose her. So that was that. So that's been my barrier. I found, I know, because I'm a big person about patterns. And to your point, Peggy, yeah, I always ask the question, what could I have done? What am I neglecting? Like, what am I not seeing about myself that could be better? But in looking at patterns, a lot of the time in my particular career, it's been female bosses that have really been a roadblock for me.
So not okay though. That doesn't make it right, and I think I'm seeing so much in the chat about how women, like, why are we so hard on each other and how do we change this narrative? And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, something that comes to mind is particularly with your story around the fact that, having like women who are, above you or had the potential to mentor, right? Like, think about like wherever you're at in your career, are you doing the same for the younger generation, right? Like, are you mentoring women and doing what you wish that you had, or being that leader that you wish that you had? Because I think that's maybe that is something that we can sit and agree on, that like we have a choice sitting here all thinking that this is unacceptable to change that.
Yeah, and that is, what I would recommend to people coming behind you to, be that person, be that mentor, because I have had a couple, not a lot, but a couple of really cool women bosses that were amazing and just were so much fun. But whenever I progressed, it was mostly men that gave me that opportunity. And so it's been interesting to watch that unfold, especially moving into my own business. So as me as a boss, it's like watching how, what kind of boss do I want to be? And so those have been, for lack of a better way of putting it, a good example of what not to be. So I actually appreciate even that experience has shown me who I don't want to be.
I love that. I feel like that can be like in my leadership coaching, I always say like that can be a really great place of like starting, who am I as a leader? Like, what is the opposite of what I want to be like, right? Nicole, what are your thoughts on, barriers that you've faced and how you've overcome them?
I want to quickly comment on that because I agree. And I love that we in this room are now committing to be part of the solution to that. And I love that. And what you said, Leslie, really resonates so much. And one of the things that I love so much about building Ama La Vida, like we get to serve our clients, we get to create this service we wanted to see in the world, but we get to create the company we wanted to see in the world and be the leaders and be the teammates that we wish we had earlier on in our career. And as we all continue to rise, we get that opportunity. So I love that reframing on what can we do to continue to push that forward. I think what came to mind for me is really, it's similar to what Peggy shared. And even I'm challenging myself in the narrative around it of like, is this true? And is this what the perception was, or is this how I perceived myself? I think coming out of undergrad, I went into management consulting, where you're already young and acting like you know things that you don't know, with people who are a lot more experienced than you. I worked in supply chain, which was really male dominated. And I was this young blonde girl from Arizona State University, which is like such a tremendous school, but has this ridiculously old reputation that people, just upon meeting me, they felt like they knew something about me, of my character or my capabilities, just based on the way that I looked and the pedigree that I didn't have. And so I think I carried that with me a lot. And some of it was actually true, in that I heard stories. And I actually very recently heard from someone who knew one of the folks who hired me for that job, who said, oh yeah, it can't hurt to have the blonde girl from ASU around here. And I was like, I thought I crushed that interview, and I'm sure that I did. And both of those things are true. And I think over time, I cared a lot about those perceptions in the beginning, and I really actively managed them. So I remember, similar to Peggy, like being in these rooms with all men, and someone would be like, oh, we need water. And I would sit there and I would make my boss go get it, or someone else, because I didn't want everyone in the room to be like, oh, this girl's just here to get us refreshments. And so it occupied a lot of brain space for me in terms of what I wore, how I presented myself, the things that I did. And I think over time, I realized it's a marathon, and people's work speaks for itself over time. And it doesn't matter if they really do have that perception of me in the beginning. Cool, that's fine. I'm going to prove you wrong. And so jokes on that guy who hired me, because I came in and did really well and went back to my natural brunette hair color, and too bad for him.
Yes, you did. I love it. Prove them wrong. Let people have their assumptions about you. And I just love this image of you, this young 20-something-year-old blonde coming in and just, proving all of that wrong. Okay, so another topic that I'd love to discuss today is this idea of balance. I think a lot of women, more so women on panels like such, will get the question of like, how do you find work-life balance, or what does that look like to you? And really this message that women, that balance is the goal, and that we can find balance. And I just love to get some perspective on this. Like, do you believe in work-life balance? Is there such a thing? If so, what have you found that has worked for you? Anything that comes up around this topic, I think it's a really important one to have, particularly as women.
Well, I can kick it off since we're kind of going around.
Yeah, I love it.
Take turns. I do believe that there is such a thing as balance. I don't know work-life balance so much. I think it's kind of like a marriage. Sometimes it's 60-40, sometimes it's 90-10, sometimes it's 80-20, sometimes it is 50-50. So I do believe that, but there is balance. And I think, at least for me, I call it more control than I do balance, because life is pretty random. So you have to be in control of what your goals, your plans, your life is, so that as things show up, you kind of know where to throw it. And to me, that's the balance, in knowing what's value added in your life and what's not. So if you know where you're headed, you know what you're doing, as things show up, you can go, okay, is that value added? If it's not, then you can still make the choice. Do I want to do this just because, or is this just not even worth my time? So for me, because I also manage a mental illness, that adds to the challenge for me, because I manage bipolar. Bipolar 2 is also similar to bipolar 1, you are impulsive. There are so many things that come up that's like, yeah, I'll do this, and then I'm going to go here, and I'm going to build this, and I'm going to do that. And it can really become a runaway train very easily. So for me, what I tend to do is there are certain things that I truly enjoy. I love going to the theater, and I love being able to say this. I have a theater concierge that calls me every year to see what tickets I'm going to choose for that year. But, you know, it sounds very posh, but at the same time, it's one of those things that I look forward to every year. And so I book them throughout the years. So I know this is something I've paid for, so I'm definitely going to do it. And it's on the calendar, so that I just place it there. And then I also do other things that I enjoy as it happens. I make sure I have a time off, but I also remind myself of my prime motivator. And my prime motivator is time. A lot of, for me, it's time, money. I never remember what comes third, but those are the two for me. And money is not the driving force, because a lot of people will say that. It's like, oh, well, I can pay you and we can do this. I don't care about that. Is it going to be worth my time? Because that I can't get back. I can make more money. I can't make more time. So I look at that. I look at, is it value added? Does it feed into the greater goal? And if it doesn't, it still might be interesting, but if it does, that's really the driver. And then also, what is it going to take away from me? What will I not be able to do? It's kind of like that spring cleaning where they say, whenever you bring something into the house, you need to throw something out. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with your time and with that balance of, okay, if you say yes to this, what either do you have to kick off your calendar, or what do you have to say no to later? And so that's how I tend to keep the balance. That's not to say that it doesn't go off the rails occasionally, and you have to give yourself grace when that happens, because again, life is random and you're like, yes, yes, yes. It's like, oh, wait, too much. So, allow yourself that backup time, but that's usually how I keep track of it. I just, stay focused on the big picture and just kind of blend in as life happens.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Spring is coming, so it's a good time to do some spring cleaning. I love that. I love this idea of the exchange of, even just asking that question. I think that's another really powerful coaching technique or tool, right? Like, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to, right? So I love that. Thank you so much. Nicole, would you like to go next? I see you're unmuted.
I think about it pretty similarly to how Leslie shared, and I love how you talk about when something comes in, something else goes out. I think that goes beyond just like the tangible, but also mentally. Like, I say this to my husband all the time when he's like, well, maybe we should do this other thing. And I'm like, I have a set amount of real estate in here. And if you want me to take something on, something else has to go off. And it's real. Like, that burden that you carry of having to think through all of these things all the time is a lot. And so I treat it similarly in terms of how I'm ruthless about what can come in and what can come out. But when you were talking about the like, sometimes it's 90-10, sometimes it's 60-40, that's how I think about it. I think that life is made up of seasons, and some of them are really long and some of them are really short. And careers are the same. Like, when we first started Ama La Vida, I didn't have a family yet. I was in a place in my life where working tons of hours and going really hustle mode was what the business needed. And it was at a place in my life where I wanted to do it. And that was serve me in that time. And I'm not in that place right now. I have, health things I'm focused on. I have childcare I need to focus on. I have a family. And so I'm in a different season of my life. And I've seen a lot of, particularly women that I've worked with, go through these cycles and put a lot of pressure on ourselves to still operate in ways that we did in the past. And I think it goes back to that grace of, like, you did the best you could with the time you had today, and that's all you can do. And I say that to myself at the end of the day, a lot of the time, when I know that there's more I want to be doing, or that I feel like I'm not fulfilling it. And it's like, yes, I am, because I'm serving my life in all these other ways, and I have to take it out of my brain and leave it there. And that's just kind of a mantra that I come back to.
Yeah, I love this idea of seasons, right? And like, I think sometimes we'll just like live in this idea that what has gotten us to a certain point is going to be the same technique or tactics that is going to get us, through the next season of life. And sometimes it calls for a whole new set of tools, right? So, shameless plug for if you're there and you need a life coach, that can be a really great topic. I'm sure Leslie and Peggy, you talk about this all the time with your life coaching
Mm,
clients.
yeah.
Peggy, what are your thoughts on balance and how do you find balance?
Yeah. So what Leslie and Nicole said was spot on. And so it takes you to know yourself first to decide what balance looks like. So for example, I think I'm very good at go, 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 do more, achieve more. So I need to be intentional and actually slow down. Otherwise, I'm going to be out of balance all the time. So I know that about myself. And also the expectations, right? We can try to achieve balance. I think balance is possible, but I don't believe we can do that all the time. We can have balance all the time. Some days are just going to be crazy and you're going to feel out of balance. But it's about how do you adjust? How do you bring yourself back and restore equilibrium, right? Restore peace and balance. Another thing is, this has to do with people pleasing as well. If you find yourself, or I mean, at least for me, right? If I find myself having trouble saying no to people, what's going on there? I would dig deeper, because in order for me to have the balance I need to slow down. That means I can't do all these things. I'm going to have to say no and to some people. If I don't feel that's okay, or that feels really difficult and uncomfortable, there's something going on there. And ask why. Why can't I draw boundaries? Why can't I do a little less? So besides people pleasing, also there's a part of me perhaps trying to prove myself, right? So that's why I always want to do more and see how much I can push myself. But at the end of the day, only you know what's serving you. Maybe some people feel very productive just by being busy and they feel fulfilled. That's okay, because that's who they are. But for some people, that doesn't work. Then we need to make some adjustment and really understand what is underneath this not having balance or not feeling enough, perhaps. So that's my take.
I love that. And I love that, starting from like knowing who you are too, and knowing yourself that you are an achiever and that's a strength that you have, right? And so it is going to look a little bit different for you than someone who maybe has a different set of strengths. So I love that. Self-awareness is critical. That just popped up. So I think with our careers, there's often this, I don't know, it's like this Instagram highlight reel of like our lives, and there isn't the kind of messiness that is portrayed, right? Or we like, maybe we remember the mistakes, but sometimes that's not always what we outwardly see in other people. And so I'm curious if all of you can go around and tell us about a mistake that you've made or a failure in your career and what you've learned from it.
Back to me.
Sure.
I have been actively trying to do exactly what you said, Kate, which is share more authentically about the challenges and mistakes that happen literally on a daily basis, particularly as a leader, because being a leader is messy and confusing. And even though we talk about it all day long, no one navigates it perfectly because we're human. So I think there's a lot that we can all learn by being more open about those things. And so it's something I'm really focused on. Thinking career-wise, I think one of my biggest mistakes as I reflect on it is how much I followed the rules in the beginning and waited to be invited or to be given permission to really do anything. And then realizing, particularly now as I've become a leader and an employer, seeing how other people navigate those things and like, wow, I really should have negotiated, or I should have asked for this. And I think so many of us think that there's one right way to do things and there's infinite right ways to do things. And I've seen it here at Ama La Vida, the people who really are clear about what they want and need to be successful, really engage and are present and ask for what they want, are the ones who get the most clients, who do the most work, who are most fulfilled by their work because they're creating a job for themselves. And I don't mean that by the title or what's on the paper, but like how they operate and the environment around them. And I think that's so much more important. And so I would say in the beginning, especially if you're coming out of school, everything is so regimented. And so here's the process, here's the results. And then you get into the corporate world and you think there's a similar system, and it's like, no, there's not. The rules are out the window, and the thing that you think you can't do, someone else is doing. So do it and ask for it.
I love that. I love so much about that. Yeah. The idea of like, just, that someone else is doing it, right? Or like, I think there's so many times where like, we think that we need permission. I mean, I know, Nicole, you're obviously, through the lens of entrepreneurship, like, right? Like, I think no one, like, you're making this up a little bit as you go. I think you've said that to me before, in this idea of like, I don't, I answer to myself, but like, yeah, like no one's waiting and saying like to Nicole and Forum, like, go create Ama La Vida, right? Like you all did that on your own. So I love that idea. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next. There's so many. I can't really think of one, but I made so many mistakes. Back then, I guess before I became a coach, I was really hard on myself. I think I am still hard on myself, but much better. And all the mistakes I made actually made me a better person and made me a little wiser. So I want to make sure everybody knows that mistakes are not always bad. So instead of talking about mistakes, just because there's so many, I can't think of one that's, if I have to tell you about my mistakes, I feel like I have to tell you all of them. So I want to talk about a little regret.
Overachiever.
Exactly, right? Remember Nicole was talking about if she thinks someone is expecting a glass of water and she's telling herself, I'm not going to get up and do it. But I was the opposite. I tried to play this good girl role where I would get up to get someone a glass of water. I was that person because it worked for me in some way, right? But now I'm not proud of it. I have a little bit of regret. I mean, that was who I was, right? It is what it is. But I wish I knew what I know now and be okay with being who I am. And it's okay if I'm not always the good girl that follows the rules, right? And it's okay that I disagree with people. One of my values is harmony. I mean, I love it. It's my value. But at the same time, I know because of harmony, if I want to embrace that value, that means I will do everything in my power to avoid conflict and disagreement. But is that really healthy? Now I'm asking myself this question. Can I still embrace harmony, but also speak up so that I can have better communication with people instead of just kind of keep quiet and assume that I shouldn't be speaking or assume what people are thinking? So anyway, a little bit of rant here, but what I'm saying is, now that I'm aware of what's going on, sometimes we want to re-examine our values and our beliefs and see whether they are really serving us the right way. Same thing with people pleasing, just really quick, because I talk to my clients about this too. Let's say if you're in the hospitality industry and you have that people pleasing tendency, that actually will work really well for you when you're doing your job. But, I mean, we all know people pleasing tendency is not going to work very well for you personally. So it's about maybe we can turn a weakness into strength and really expand on that strength. But we also want to know, it's just like a Spider-Man, right? Like I'm always so impressed with the control, right? How far he shoots the web and he's able to catch him. You know what I mean? So if you have that superpower, use it in the right place and know how to control it. And really embrace who you are, accept yourself, but at the same time, take care of yourself. If you know you're using too much of your superpower, now it feels really draining, then maybe this is sometimes you need to hold back. So anyway, I feel like I'm going on a tangent, but I hope that makes sense.
I love it. I mean, I love this idea of like our strengths are also our weaknesses, or our strengths if overextended can be our weaknesses. I think harmony is such a good example of that, where obviously that has such a set of strengths, but it has an edge too. Like another example of that is positivity is one of mine. And on a good day, I can bring light and energy and enthusiasm to a space. On a bad day, I can come across as like totally out of touch and, naive too. Right. So I think it's good to know with your strengths also what those edges are too. I love this. Kind of shifting gears here, what advice would you give to the next generation of women?
I'll start. And actually, I want to actually speak to the mistake question. For me, what I learned is that words land on people differently. So as a speaker, as a coach, we say things. And I remember I was doing a training and I was teaching admins how to deal with interruptions. And I used the word trickery. I said, you can pretend like you're on the phone and, show them and how they can pretend how to get people to walk away from them. And a lady in the audience raised her hand very politely and said out loud in front of everybody, "So you're basically telling us to lie." And so as a speaker at the front of the room, I instantly lost credibility. So it was up to me to regain the trust of my audience, to also make her feel better as well, because after that, she's not going to hear anything else I had to say. So in that moment, I learned that, wow, to me, I'm just being very flippant about the word trickery. It's like, I'm just, it's just a technique. It's just me adding liveliness to this lesson. But how it landed on her was deceit. It was, dishonesty. And I had no idea. And in that moment, I learned so much, and I've carried that with me a lot of the time. So, just understanding, especially in what we do, the words we choose matter. And they're not always going to come out right, but recognizing, looking at body language, understanding how they're landing on the other person. I say this with communication all the time, that we tend to communicate the way we prefer, but we really have to communicate the way the receiver communicates primarily. And that's not always known, but you do have to try that. But it shouldn't be the way you communicate. It really has to be the way the receiver communicates. And so in that vein, just understanding that the words we use have power. And they are going to land on people differently. Where one person is like, whatever is cool. The other person is like, how dare you say that? So just recognizing that with people. And I'll blend that into the advice I give to the next generation is exactly that. Exactly recognize that your words matter, and how you show up in the world. What I always like to say is, what is your billboard? Like, what are you selling in the world? And so understanding how you represent you, and then, like we said earlier, help other people coming up behind you and give them that advice when they come to you. Now, if you want to offer it, that's great. But when someone comes to you with a question, give them the time. And if you don't have it in that moment, schedule that time. But they're coming to you for a reason. They're coming to you because they see something in you that they want to emulate usually. So value that, recognize it, honor it, and give them that light of it. When I mention something, it matters to somebody. I'm not just talking in the wind. I'm not just throwing darts at a board. This person actually values my drive and my interest enough to spend time with me. So that's so important.
Oh my gosh, I love that story so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I mean, what a gift that that woman gave you in that moment. That's all I can think, right? We don't always, I mean, this idea of our words land in different ways. We don't always know, right? And I think I can think of times like that where I've been corrected too as a facilitator or in friendships or just whatever the topic is. And it's like, oh, I never knew that, right? And like you can feel that kind of shame and like, oh my God, like how do I come back to this? I'm sure in the moment you had to really improvise too, but like, what a gift.
Yeah. In the moment it was, and I was young too. So it was really,
Yeah.
it was really crazy, but I was able to bring it back. So
You bounced back. I'm sure. Thank you for sharing. So what advice would you give the next generation of women?
I can jump in. I also love what you're sharing about the way that your words land with each person. I think it just goes to show that there's no one size fits all to anything. The way you communicate with each individual, the way you manage each person has to be tailored to that individual. And it's our responsibility to figure out how to do that and to best serve each individual. And it's a lot, but it's our jobs. I think kind of sort of related to that, I think my advice would be to not undervalue the power of relationships. I think particularly in the way our workplaces are shifting. I always say, like, I hate networking, but I love making friends. And I think that I saw in the chat a few people who I really resonated with in terms of like being told you're too friendly or overly empathetic. And I think those things, of course, need to have boundaries, but can also be superpowers. And I think early in our careers, and I certainly was like this, like, okay, I can't work with friends and there's got to be a professional line. And over time now I'm like, I only want to work with friends and I only want to work with people who become friends because we share values, because I enjoy being around them, because going back to the, like, your job description and like tasks, while it feels like the thing, is like such an actually small part of your daily life experience in your career. And so much more is shaped by the people and the environment. And so that's really important to me. And I think both in having a really positive workplace that I enjoy being with people who inspire me and I want to be around, and also the opportunities that come, like still to this day, the vast majority of our corporate relationships and partnerships have come from people who have become friends. And so I think it's really easy to forget about that and feel like things have become more transactional. But I would say, don't forget to be yourself and be authentic and really build those friendships at work. And I fully stand behind that, even if HR yells at me.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, I know we're at 55.
Go ahead.
Okay, so your relationship with yourself is the most important relationship. I know some people might interpret this as, oh, you're being selfish, you only care about yourself. But if you think about this a little deeper, what you think about yourself, what you say to yourself, and how you treat yourself will reflect in your other relationships and all aspects of your life. If you don't think you're worthy, guess what? You're going to feel that way everywhere you go. So it's important to know yourself and build a better relationship with yourself. We're all worthy. And that's something I can guarantee you. But you have to feel that way too. I know a lot of people say, oh, you know, let's just say these nice things and call it a day. But if you don't believe in these nice things, if you don't create a positive story for yourself, then it's going to feel very negative. And or people say shaky confidence, right? Sometimes we have these fake confidence. Maybe we feel confident in one moment, but that changes really quickly just because somebody said something. So again, your relationship with yourself is the most important thing. And that will be my advice, is to really examine how you're treating yourself and go from there. Yeah.
I love that so much. It's constant work in progress over here. I think for probably everyone would agree with that.
Yes.
It's, I mean, when you think about it, it's like we're with ourselves our whole lives, like from the moment our first breath to our last exhale, right? And so it is arguably the most important relationship that we have, and it stems from, you know, I mean, thinking about how do our words land, and, you know, all the advice that's been shared today, right? Like if we can't be the best versions of ourselves, how on earth are we going to be great leaders, great mothers, great friends, you know, all of these identities and hats that we serve. So I love that. We are coming up to the top of the hour here. I want to thank Peggy, Leslie, and Nicole for joining this wonderful discussion. I personally have thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm going to be like riding this high for the rest of the week. Are there any closing thoughts from anyone on the panel, or Jillian? I know you're on the call too. We will definitely send the follow-up, and I mentioned that strengths module I think would be a helpful resource as well. Anything else? Seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
thank
If
you,
anybody
guys.
has questions, feel free to stay a little longer. I don't know how you feel, Leslie and Nicole, if we can answer a few questions, if people want to share their thoughts, feelings, and ask questions.
Yeah, I'm available. I'm open.
Hang on.
Yeah, Kate, is
Thank
that
you,
okay with
everyone.
you?
Yeah, we can hang on. I do have another client at 15 after, so I'll probably drop a couple minutes early just to prep for her.
We did have one question come through earlier that I would love to kind of bring up since we have a little time. And it's to the whole panel. It's how do you navigate your emotions and start a conversation in regards to a work relationship where there is a conflict in understanding each other?
I can jump in with that. I use what I talked about in the people pleasing. I use the assertiveness script. You know, I focus again on the behavior. How do you take the people out of the conversation, and when whatever happened, the effect is how it impacts you and how you feel about it, I feel. And then again, be careful of your words. Just focus on general but feeling words, very specific feeling words, and then finally wrap it up with what you want. How do you want that situation to play out? So just using that script, and again, in the beginning it might sound scripted, but getting in the habit of keeping it concise and focusing on the behavior and not the you did this or you said that or I didn't like and all of that, taking all of that out of it and really focusing on the thing that happened to you, then that kind of neutralizes the conversation. That does not guarantee that the other person won't get, you know, defensive and try and explain and all of that. But again, if you can stick to the behavior, then it does minimize. It might not eliminate, but it definitely minimizes that defensive response and that need to explain their bad behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I love the script that you talk about. Honestly, it's like that's kind of what comes to mind for me too. And getting, you know, the way I see it is it's kind of 4 parts. It's the facts, which is what actually happened. Then the stories, right, which is how the meaning that you derived based on the facts. And then the feelings, right? We often say like, I feel that you don't care about me because you did this. That's actually a story. That is not a feeling, right? I feel disappointed because you said this thing and it made me feel this way. Like, or the story that I created was this, I think is another way. So keep feelings like as feelings. And then I love this last question of what is it that you want from the other person, but also asking yourself, what do you want for yourself in this? Are you invested in this relationship, right? Like sometimes we have to work together. So it doesn't have to be all feeling in that. It's just like stick to the facts, right? But sometimes it's like, there might be something deeper there. You might be more invested in this. So facts, stories, feelings, wants.
Perfect answer. And to just add a little bit, prior to that conversation, I would take some time to process emotions. If I'm having a hard time dealing with someone at work, what exactly am I feeling? What are the triggers? And how do I compartmentalize this whole thing? Because it's hard and not everybody gets along, and that's okay. But how do we still achieve the results that we need? So that's something I would definitely do before having a conversation, is processing my emotions. Yeah.
I would do that too. And then the element I would add to that is also taking a second to think about their emotions and their behaviors. I do believe that most bad behaviors are coming from some place of insecurity, and the way that manifests is not excusable, but more understandable when you're take a step back to go, what are they dealing with? What are their fears they're grappling with? And I think that helps me approach it from a place that could be more resolution oriented versus like, this person harmed me in this way.
Amazing. Thank you. We have another question that just came in. If the manager always asks for more contribution or help from me while appreciating my excellent performance, but he doesn't want to he doesn't want to teach or promote me for keeping his job, I think, any suggestions? I think, Julia, if there's a way to maybe rephrase that a little bit. If the manager asks for more help from me while appreciating my excellent performance, but he doesn't want to teach or promote me, any suggestions? Maybe that's a little bit better.
Yeah, I'd be curious, I think, just like contextually around what's happening here. Like, are you in like a hiring freeze in the organization and that's why they can't promote you? Have you pushed for yourself for a promotion, right? Have you kind of really, taken your goals and said, this was my expectations and I've exceeded, and here, have you advocated for yourself to get promoted? I think there's some context there that I'd be curious about. I think ultimately too, it may be like, what is it that you want from your manager, right? Like if they can't promote you because of the current economic climate, what does that look like? What do you need to dial back in certain areas? Are there certain social projects that could help develop further skills that would make you feel appreciated and valued? Those are just a couple thoughts that I have.
Yeah, I agree. And I will ask for clarity.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to do so I can advance to XYZ position? Sometimes, yeah, it's true, right? Your boss actually loves you and just wants to keep you around because you're the superstar. But what exactly is going on there? So it's not beneficial for this person to promote you. Then that needs to be addressed. It sounds like maybe this person's insecurity needs to be addressed. So yeah, I will ask for clarity first. And if it's truly this boss being selfish, then maybe it's time to talk to more people and seek other opportunities. Yeah.
Thank you all so much. I know we're at time, and thank you all. Thank you to the panelists, Kate, Peggy, Nicole, for being here. Are there any just final words that you want to wish everyone here on International Women's Day?
I want to say thank you for spending your time with us. The chat was just as open and vulnerable as the stories we were sharing. And I think it always surprises me, though it shouldn't, our stories are so different. We're all so different. We have different contexts, but I think the emotions we're all feeling through this experience are so similar. And I just feel closer to you all having shared this conversation, and I appreciate it and hope we can do more. So thank you to everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just really grateful to be here and to spend time with everybody.
Thank you all so much. Happy International Women's Day.